he hears the same complaint. Police offer the know your rights information, and they're not receiving a receipt detailing the reason for the stop. So the question, how do you reconcile those two solitudes? What policies will your party implement to rid us of what most people in this audience believe is systemic inequality in the criminal justice system? And specifically, will you eliminate street checks, not just regulate them? Starting with Mike.
Yes, Royson, we absolutely should eliminate carding, period, full stop, it's over. The data collected through carding should be destroyed to protect the people who are affected by that data. Our police services should have mandatory anti-racism training, more training to de-escalate conflict, and better training to deal with mental health issues. Our juries need to be fair and equitable. So we would actually propose changing the way in which the jury pool is put together to not make it from property roles, but actually from OHIP roles, so we have a more diverse community in which to select jurors. And finally, we need more diverse hirings in our police force so they're more connected to our communities.
Kathleen, yes.
Yes. So on carding, and I know that there are many of you in this room who have given us input, and we've worked with you. And I will be the first to admit I sat at the policy tables and listened to the issues on both sides of this issue, and we have worked to find a balance. And you know, the notion that random street checks would happen, random carding would happen, is unacceptable. And the regulation that we have put in place does not allow that. It does not allow random street checks. Now, is it still happening? I think it is still happening. Yes, exactly. And that is a culture shift that has not been completed. And I agree with Mike that there needs to be more training for police officers. You know, they are going through this and trying to figure out how to do it. They're changing behaviors that were unacceptable behaviors, but they're having to change to new behaviors. So we work to find a balance between allowing police officers to do their jobs and making sure that they were not overreaching and treating people randomly and unfairly as they had been. So we're gonna continue to work to solve this challenge. Well, I hear what you're saying. That's what the regulation is intended to do, and we're going to make sure if it's not happening, if that's not happening, then we're going to work to see how we can modify that.
Andrea?
Okay?
We've said unequivocally that we will ban carding in the province of Ontario. It is unconstitutional and it has no role to play in a fair and free society. Look, it's not about balance. The balance has been unfavorable to the Black community for decades and decades and centuries. And so balance is not what it's about. It's about fixing the imbalance that has occurred for far too long. And so we are not afraid of doing that. Look, when I go to a group of young people in the Black community here, in this community actually, the Youth for Youth initiative, and I sit and talk to them when we were trying to push the government to put together the anti-racism directorate in this province, and hear the stories of those young people asking me, well, once the carding is banned, how are we going to deal with it? The police are still going to approach us, and if we don't give them information, then the next time they're around the block, we're going to be worried that they have a target on us because we didn't give them the information that they wanted. Now, this is what young Black men are saying is their lived experience day in and day out. Where they're at a park sitting on a bench and the older white man on the bench next to them doesn't get even a second look, and yet the minute the police officers walk by, they're right on that young Black youth that's sitting on a bench minding his own business. This is the culture shift that needs to occur, and it only occurs with a very clear message that carding is not acceptable, it should not be part of policing, and what we need to do is respect each other and respect young people. Because yes, guess what? They have something to offer, and most of them are great kids, right? And so let's build them up instead of tear them down. Let's tell them they're worth something instead of telling them they're not. Let's show them that they belong, yes, in the park bench, yes, at the corner store, yes, in the university, yes, in the high school. They belong everywhere.
Thank you, Andrea Horwath. Now we have a follow-up question from Desmond Cole. So Desmond, could you state that question, please?
Sorry, I'm over here.
Oh, there you are. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, quick.
Good evening. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I wrote this down. This has been touched on a little bit already, but to get even more specific, police in large municipalities such as Ottawa and Peel Region now say that they are only conducting a handful of what they call street checks, we know it as carding, but that they're only conducting a handful of those stops every year. For example, in Ottawa, a city of over 1 million people, police say they conducted only 7 carding stops last year. In Peel Region, police say that they conducted only 2 street checks in 2017. They conducted 26,000 the year before. So now they're saying they've gone from 26,000 to 2. My simple question for all 3 of you is, do you accept the police's statistics?
So, Desmond, thanks for. I want to thank you for the question, and I want to thank you for your advocacy, because you're a strong, important voice. And do I accept those statistics? I think that we are in the midst of a transition. So I don't know whether those are accurate or not. I don't know if those are accurate or not. I honestly can't tell you. I can't tell you whether those are accurate or not. And look, I know, what Andrea has said is it's a very coherent riff on carding. It's very coherent and it's very appealing. But the reality is,
it's more than a riff.
You know what, Andrea? It doesn't tackle the real challenge of making those attitudinal shifts, of changing people's behavior, of changing people's understanding. And I would love to say, I've got a magic wand and we are going to ban that practice and it's never going to happen again. But the reality is that we have to find a way to allow the fair and just police work that needs to happen in our communities, and it gets at, it gets at the trust between those young kids you're talking about, the Black community and the police. And I just want to say, the person who has said that he's going to bring back carding and stop even trying to sort this out isn't even here tonight. So that's what we have to recognize.
Good. Now the other 2 candidates, can you quickly answer what Desmond
what Desmond
put to you? Which was, do you believe the stats?
Desmond raises the issue, though, and it's an important one, about what kind of information is being gathered in terms of how police forces are reporting. Is there consistency across all of the police forces, and where is that requirement of consistent reporting and information? And I think that's work that absolutely needs to be done. And I think the question in itself raises that other question about the efficacy of the information that's being provided.
Mike.
Yeah, so given the conversations I've had with people in the community, I can't imagine how those numbers could be any way accurate. I've had more conversations with people who have, said they've been carded than what those numbers show. So it's clear we need a complete overhaul of the data collection system so we can actually start having accurate numbers, so we can actually make real decisions that benefit our communities.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's move over to health. Dr. Chris Morgan, your turn, sir, for the health question.
afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk about health Chris Morgan from the Black Health Alliance. There's been 3 pieces of legislation over the last, going back to 2006, which all speak specifically as it relates to health. And these pieces of legislation collectively talk about providing a healthcare system which is accessible, which is equitable, which provides, which is focused on reducing disparities and inequities, which is supposed to have commitments on health promotion, and which is also supposed to respect the diversity of communities and involve them in the implementation, the planning, and the development, and so forth. And so despite these legislations, these are currently existing legislations, members of the Black community, second next to probably the Indigenous community, experience a significant burden as it relates to health. We are twice as more likely to have diabetes, hypertension, and the complications thereof. In terms of mental health, the funding allocated for mental health services for the Black community are significantly lower than they are for the white community. We find that HIV and AIDS, the number of incidents in HIV, newly diagnoses, 65% of them are Black women in the province of Ontario. So despite, not to mention, many of us, when we go to frontline healthcare services, there are experiences of anti-Black racism which further impacts the outcomes that we receive. So despite the existing legislation that's in place and the experiences of many of us in the community, there's a clear imbalance. So my first question is really, what will you do as a Premier, as a leader, to rectify and create an accountable healthcare system which is going to reverse this trend?
1 minute, please. Yes.
Yeah, so I know that, and thank you for your work, because I think you have been, you've been pushing to make sure that health data are collected as we look at the statistics. You've got some statistics, but we haven't yet got health data being collected, race-based health data being collected, and so we will commit to do that. We are committing to do that. In fact, local health integration networks now have health equity as part of their mandate, so that is a shift. But look, there is, there's more that we need to do in terms of targeting resources. I talked earlier about mental health dollars that we are targeting specifically to youth, racialized youth. And I think that if you look across all of the initiatives that we've put in place, we're taking part of those funds and we're saying, you know what, it's not good enough to expect that they're just going to, deal with the equity issues unless we target them. So the same goes for mental health, the same goes for gathering those health data.
Okay, Andrea.
Thanks, Royson. Look, there are some organizations that are doing some great work to try to make sure that the access to healthcare services are available. And so the community health centers, for example, I think about Taibu, particularly, who's doing a lot of great work, absolutely, to meet the needs particularly of the Black population. And we can mandate LHINs to do that work, but unless we're following up and measuring whether in fact they're having any impact whatsoever on health equity, mandating them to do so is really not very effective. But what I can say is this, the plans that New Democrats have will help the Black community. We will help everyone to be able to get the dental care that you need, no matter how old you are, no matter where you live, no matter where you work. Prescription drugs for everyone. So if you're a 45, 55-year-old person and you have hypertension or diabetes, you're not going to be left on your own. You're going to have your prescription drugs covered because that's what's necessary for your overall health. So we don't pick and choose about who's able to access the programs that we think everybody needs. Everybody needs them. Everyone's going to get them. But it's not just that. It's making sure that you're providing the kind of access. So not just the overall program, but the specific access at the community level, which is why organizations like Taibu and others will continue to get the support of New Democrats. It's just not a matter of, providing people the opportunity. It's making sure they have access, and that's something we're very committed to.
Mike, your turn.
So I think one of the biggest challenges that the status quo parties face in Ontario is the inability to think about how we can transform our healthcare system to make it more about promoting health and preventing illness instead of just treating sickness. So I'm so happy the framing of your question was so important. So what does that mean? British Columbia spends 3 times more money on preventing illness than Ontario does. They have a healthier population because of it, which then puts less pressure on our acute care systems and our hospitals. So we need to invest more in nurse practitioner-led clinics, community health centers, family health teams, more holistic, stronger primary health care in our communities. And finally, we have to start looking at healthcare through what's known as the social determinants of health. Poverty contributes to healthcare, mental health, having a place you can afford to call home contributes to your healthcare. Having streets that are safe for pedestrians and cyclists to actually travel on has a huge impact on your healthcare. So let's start thinking about preventing illness instead of just treating it.
I just want to jump in for one sec, because the things that my friends here are talking about are exactly what we're doing. So we're building the community health centers. The resources, well, but I know it's not enough. I know that we're not there yet, but we have to be realistic about what is actually happening.
And
those
do the other
community
two
health
again?
centers, Taibu, the money that we're talking about, mental health money, it's those community agencies that money is going to.
Do you agree with that, Andrea?
Look,
It's not a matter of agreement, that's what's happening.
But it's been 15 years and we haven't seen the kind of change that we need. And I actually agree absolutely with Mike. We hear from the RNAO every single year about the social determinants of health. We hear about the overrepresentation of black people in the ranks of people living in poverty. That's not acceptable. And so we can't just continue to hear about these statistics and not put effective government programs in place to make the change happen, change for the better.
Thank you. Okay,
Royson, can I just say one thing really quick? I'm sorry. I know I'm the third wheel over here, but no. Seriously, like I don't have a seat at Queen's Park, so but that my role is to stir the pot a little bit here. And I know I'm not going to be premier, but I think I can be an effective opposition leader. And so I would like one of the two people over here. Could we commit to just reaching BC's targets for health promotion and illness prevention? Could we do that? That's what I would like to fight for.
You know what, Mike?
NDP government, guaranteed.
Thank you, Mike. We must go to the next
Great
question.
idea.
We have a follow-up. We have a follow-up question here, and I think we're even presenting it in French and English. So let's go.
Okay. Hello. Okay. All right. Push me forward. Okay.
This
Hello.
is Nakia Lee Foon,
Yes.
right? Wonderful. Terrific.
Hello. Good evening. Bonsoir. Je m'appelle Nakia Lee Foon, and I am the Vice President of the Black Health Alliance. Oh, okay. I'm coming closer. Okay, I'm stopping. Bonsoir. Je m'appelle Nakia Lee Foon, et je suis la vice-présidente d'Alliance Santé Noire. So my follow-up question, as was said, is going to be said in English and in French. So my question to you is, if elected, will your government commit to developing a population-focused Black health strategy? So again, in French, si élu, pourriez-vous dire que votre gouvernement s'engage-t-il à le développement d'une stratégie de santé basée sur la population noire en Ontario? Merci. Thank you.
Et ce moment, pour nous, c'est très important d'avoir les statistiques pour développer une stratégie pour la population noire, mais aussi d'avoir l'information accurate, je ne sais pas le mot pour accurate, mais pour alloquer les fonds pour améliorer les situations spécifiques dans toutes les populations en Ontario. C'est la raison d'avoir un anti-racism directorate pour travailler avec tout le gouvernement, avec tous les ministères pour développer cette stratégie. Yes, the work that we're doing right now to develop statistics, to gather statistics, to develop a strategy that actually is accurately targeted is exactly our intention.
So I'm glad that the question.
What does that say about your leadership? Your own health minister resigned.
and he went to Ottawa to develop a pharmacare plan based on the OHIP Plus plan that we have in Ontario for kids and then for seniors next year that allows access to 4,400 medications, all the medications that are on the formulary. So he's going to work at the federal level, having launched the program here in Ontario.
Let's hope if the feds ever get involved in a pharmacare program for the nation, they don't leave out everybody from the age of 25 to 65.
And they don't.
So having said that, just on the question that was asked by Kaylee, look, it is obvious that the current situation where the Premier talked earlier about ensuring that the LHINs have a health equity lens or mandate isn't working. So absolutely, we know that the Francophone community health centers as well as the other community health centers in our province are very much on the ground, on the front lines, working with the Black community in every part of our province, my community in Hamilton, here in this great city, and all around Ontario. And that important work needs to be supported. But the existing systems don't seem to be addressing the inequities that continue to exist in our health system. And we just need to look to Brampton, where we have the most significant crisis when it comes to a hospital overcrowding in a burgeoning, growing community that happens to be mostly newcomers, and somehow they can't get the kind of hospital care that they need because the government has not been paying attention to exactly that, population-based health investments, which needs to happen.
Thank you, Andrea.
So I agree that population-based health programs need to develop, and the data needs to be collected so we know what action to take. But it's also one of the reasons I'm such a huge supporter of investing more in community health care. You know, yesterday I was at the Community Health Center in Guelph for a soup lunch that was put on for the community. And that's a healthcare center that knows the needs of their community, because they're a part of their community, they're invested in their community, and they're delivering the programs their community wants and needs. And we need more of that in Ontario.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's move to some business questions. The Crosstown LRT project is a terrific project that will add wonderful improvements to our community. But the construction is threatening to destroy Black businesses in the area around Oakwood Avenue, also known as Little Jamaica. Many business owners who have been part of the community since the 1970s are seriously considering closing shop, which could remove a vital and historic portion of Toronto's Caribbean community and usher in gentrification. Did the province do enough to insulate these businesses? And as Premier, what would you do retroactively and immediately to salvage these businesses and prevent their displacement? Start with Andrea.
Thanks very much, Royson. I think that there's a couple of pieces here. One is that the community benefits agreements that are put together when these major infrastructure projects are undertaken need to be effective. And so we need to make sure that local communities are benefiting from the jobs that are being created on these projects. So that's one piece. When it comes to the local small business communities, you know, I was a city councillor in Hamilton, and we saw major changes in our downtown when I was there. And one of the things that we did was, before the project even started, we made sure that the phasing of the work was such that no business was left swinging kind of in the wind without any access for long periods of time. And if that hasn't happened here, then shame on those folks that have done this work and not taken into consideration the need for access to customers, or access to businesses by customers. That's the kind of work that needs to be done in advance. What we're stuck with now, I'm going to have to sit down and talk to the community about where things have ended up, because we don't want to see the loss of business. We don't want to see the loss of you know, small Black community businesses being the result, the legacy of this very important project.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, so when I travel communities across Ontario and there's major infrastructure projects like this is a concern I hear over and over again from small business owners. And so I think it's absolutely critical that we start having a fund that's part of the infrastructure fund that provides cash flow relief to small businesses to help them survive these major disruptions. Because once transit is built, it's oftentimes benefits local businesses, but we can't have the local businesses going out of business while the transit's being built. And so we need to have a cash flow fund for small businesses to protect them around major infrastructure developments in Ontario.
Okay, Captain Wayne.
And I think that honestly, we got off to a very bad start in terms of the relationship between Metrolinx and the local community. I think it's gotten better. I think there's a better understanding. There's learnings, and the community benefits agreements that are in place are improving. There's more that we can do, but the concept of a community benefits agreement that has been developed here in partnership is a good thing, and we need to build on that. So I think there have been learnings. Building infrastructure in already built up areas is a real challenge. There's no doubt about that. There have been learnings, as I say, at the beginning of this process, and we are, I think, positioned now to do much, much better as that project. And it's not the only project. There are so many projects that are being built that are going to have similar challenges, and so we need to take those learnings and make sure that we do better at the beginnings of those.
I already answered.
Oh, sorry.
I'm happy to
I'm the one that's behind.
I talk to other local businesses.
Okay. Thank you. Arts and culture, Denise Jones. Jones and Jones.
Thank you, Royson. Advocacy to establish a museum of Black history and culture in Southern Ontario has come from the Black community for many years. Concurrently, our artists and entertainers and cultural entrepreneurs fill the provincial coffers with taxes generated from festivals like, can I still call it Caribana?
Yes,
Afrofest, Jamaica Day, Jambana, Jerk Fest, Rastafest, and many others. And we started a coalition to actually make a case about how we're working on. Band, the OBHS, and Buxton Museum in Chatham, where I spent a lot of my time when I was at the University of Windsor, continues to provide significant education and edutainment, we call it, experiences for Ontarians to learn about Black culture. If elected, what will you do to make the museum not just a dream, but a reality? And more urgently, what plan do you have for sustained funding and promotion of Black arts and culture to the benefit of Ontarians for the 1.4 million people with visitors we bring into this province every year?
Mike?
So that was both an excellent question and an amazing advertisement at the same time. So absolutely we need more funding to the Ontario Arts Council and directed specifically to minority communities, absolutely. And the bottom line is, and I can say this as a longtime small business owner, the economic benefits for our local businesses of cultural activities is huge. And so financial support for those activities not only benefits the communities whose culture we are celebrating, but it also benefits those communities economically, and therefore those communities should receive funding to provide those benefits. And absolutely, I'm with you 100% on fighting for the museum.
So, two parts to your question. In terms of the sustained arts funding, we have just increased the Ontario Arts Council by $50 million over the next few years, and part of that money is targeted at racialized communities. So Black arts is part of the mandate for investing that money. I love the idea of the museum. I think that's a great idea. I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen a proposal. I don't know. You said the coalition is coming together, so if I'm back in this chair, I absolutely would like to see what the proposal looks like. I think it's a great idea.
Thanks, Denise, for the question. It's an important one, and I think that we have to always remember that commitment to arts and culture needs to be starting in the schools and carried on throughout communities. So that's a big commitment that we have. But look, the other thing that we need to talk about is not just the Ontario Arts Council or the Ontario Media Development Corporation. What do those organizations look like? Who are on the boards of those organizations? Do they reflect the community? Is there a mandate for equity? Is there a commitment that every year of granting dollars there needs to be an equity lens put on those grants? These are the kinds of systemic changes that we need to look at. And when it comes to the museum, long past due. The museum was promised a long time ago. It should be up and running now. We're there for sure.
Very much. So, we're going to turn some of these questions over to you, the audience. Can the people at the microphone make themselves seen?
That would be me.
So, what we'd like to do is, there's a youth group here that has a youth question. Where are you? Why don't you go to Marva immediately first.
There's that young person. The youth?
And
no offense, but
hold it. There hasn't been a seniors question either. So if there's a seniors question, you go right after youth. Okay, youth first. Where's that person with the youth question? And then the seniors right after, and then it's a free-for-all.
I just want to remind you, in terms of how long you have for the questions.
1 minute. Total.
In total, so 30 seconds is your ask, and then the response.
Right.
So I'm going to remind you of that again, okay? So we can get as many people in as possible. Look behind you. Your neighbor's going to give you the stink eye if you're going to go on for a long time.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here with Generation Chosen. And we are a group here based in Jane and Finch area, and we're advocates for mental health and emotional intelligence, and this is my question. At Generation Chosen, as a youth mentor in training, I've helped counsel many racialized youth in the Jane and Finch area who, as a result, they've been experiencing depression, anxiety, moodiness, and stress. They have often revealed that their emotional status are a result of missed relationships at school between themselves and their teachers, or themselves and their peers. At Generation Chosen, we believe that the lack of mental health advocacy and emotional intelligence training is one of the major contributions as to why youths we serve nowadays feel emotional and abandoned and categorized as problems. So my question is, what will you do, or what will your parties do to ensure that mental health standards are being maintained within the education system so that our youth don't have to feel marginalized, mistreated as they currently do? And what are you willing to do to put your money where your mouth is, or our money where your mouth is, to help us out?
Let's see you. Our youth, let us applaud our youth. Turn around, love, so we can see you. Thank you. Yeah. All right.
And before the response, I'm just going to remind you, for those who have questions prepared, the preamble can't be that long. It was wonderful, and I know, and I love that it was so well prepared, but we have to leave it.
30 seconds.
So do you want? Yeah. So Thank you. And you know, the awareness of mental health challenges has just increased exponentially over the last number of years. So we're catching up as a society, not just as government, but as a society. We've got a mental health strategy, $2 billion. There's $116 million specifically for racialized and more marginalized young people. But we also are putting mental health workers into schools. We had mental health workers in school boards, but they're going into high school, so we're increasing the funding so that there will be more resources right in your school.
Andrea?
Thank you. I actually would say that the high school piece is an important piece, but I think a lot of young children are experiencing a lot of trauma at the grade school level, and we need to have educational assistants and social workers and access to counselors at the elementary panel as well, and the funding needs to be there to support those resources because those kids need to have that support.
So I think it's absolutely unacceptable that 12,000 kids are on a waiting list right now to access mental health services. It's completely unacceptable. I think we should be looking at having mental health services be covered under OHIP. And in the short term, at the very least, if people who have to access through private services, let's at least take the provincial portion off of the HST charges for private mental health service providers. And one of the reasons we are advocating ending duplication in our school systems is to actually free up more resources to invest in our classrooms, because you should have the supports you need to have a high quality education, and we want to prioritize investments in your classroom.
Thank you, Mike.
So Mike, that's code for one school system,
One school,
right?
yeah,
That's code for no Catholic school system, just so we understand.
That is integrating. That is integrating our school systems and unifying our school systems and using the resources to improve schools for everyone, whether you're in the public system or the separate system.
Just making that
Thank you,
clear.
thank you, Mike, and thank you, Premier. We have another young person who has a question. I will be getting to other folks. We just want to prioritize a couple of youth questions. We know some burning things on your mind.
We need seniors up here. We need a speaker.
We will. We will.
He doesn't want to leave here, and so we're respecting that.
Hello, my name is Javon. We're from Laurie. And my question for you guys, Laurie. My question for you guys is, will your government commit to finding ways to facilitate ways in which schools can be held accountable based on their scores for failing Black and other marginalized youth in their educational system through treatment, suspensions, and expulsions?
Absolutely, both the suspension and expulsion situation that we have in the school system is absolutely unacceptable. The overrepresentation of Black youth in expulsions and in suspensions, it should not be happening. There's obviously systemic racism issues that are happening in our schools, and they need to stop. So yes, we will absolutely work to eradicate that situation and to make sure that young Black youth feel that they have opportunity to succeed at school and the supports that they need to achieve that success. That is absolutely absolutely important and needs to happen. But the other piece is that the supports need to be there. And so we've seen cuts to educational supports over the years. We've seen schools being closed in low-income and poor neighborhoods, and that's not acceptable. Sometimes those schools are the glue of the community, and we need to make sure that they're there. So when we talk about things like the opportunity for community hubs, that's another place where we can engage community in making sure that their built assets are there to support their young people and families.
Thank you, Andrea. Mike?
Absolutely. It has to change. And it's one of the reasons mandated anti-racism training in schools is so critically important. But I also want to just have a moment here, just to follow up on the last conversation.
Short moment.
The short moment is we can talk about the investments we want to make, but we also have to be honest about how to pay for it. And so that's the conversation I want to have as well. And I'm happy to do that in some follow-up questions, because I know my time is limited.
Yeah, so to the young man who asked the question, sorry, I didn't hear your name, but we made some changes to the suspensions and expulsion rules. I don't think they've gone far enough. We've put, contrary to what Andrea was saying, we've actually put more resources into schools. We've got more teachers than in our recent budget, putting more guidance counselors into schools, more supports. But the reality is that it goes back to the training, the ability of classroom teachers, support staff, administrators to understand how to react appropriately. I agree with Andrea that when there's situations, many situations could be dealt with right in the classroom or in the school without going into a disciplinary process. But that means that there has to be the right training, and I would say that it's uneven across the system at best.
Thank you. So now we go to, I see an iconic senior.
Accountability was the question. Accountability.
Yeah, I hear you, but we can't do follow-ups. Okay,
no,
sorry.
But you know what? Here's the issue. Accountability can only happen. You're right. When we have the data. That is part of the work that Michael Cotto is doing to get that data so that we know the magnitude of the problem, we know what's actually happening school board by school board, because not all school boards collect the same data, and we're setting a standard so that that will happen.
Thank you, Premier. We need to be mindful of others who want to ask questions. Thank you so much.
My question is about poverty. And a program was set up, I think, in Lindsay, Peterborough, and Hamilton to a guaranteed annual basic wage so that we can deal with inequities in poverty. Is there any way of expanding that kind of program? So for instance, in the GTA, we know that Black people and racial minorities suffer this inequity. Is there a way of considering expanding such a program so that Black people in this area can benefit from that project?
So I think it's
jump in, whoever.
I think it's clear that the Ontario Basic Income Project is something that is a great investigation. I am certainly prepared to support that if I become Premier on June 7th, continue on with the Basic Income Project and see what kind of information it provides us as to whether or not it is the solution. But let's face it, the Conservatives back in the late 90s cut social assistance rates by 22%. Here we are in 2018, and that injustice continues to fester in our province. There's lots of talk about anti-poverty, but last year, 2017, Toronto became the child poverty capital of Canada. After 15 years in government, a lot more action could have been taken on poverty, not only on people's incomes, but on their ability to afford a roof over their head, ability to afford their hydro bills, ability to afford food on the table for their kids. Parents and families are making choices that they shouldn't have to make, and then when they're struggling and they just can't make it, the next thing you know, the Children's Aid Society is knocking on the door trying to take the kids away. Absolutely problematic. We can fix it, and I'm looking forward to our platform. You'll see it soon, and you'll be proud of it.
So we've been, we as a society have been talking about a basic income for 35 years. We've put this pilot in place. It's very important information that we will gather from this pilot, but at the same time, we're making changes to our social assistance support. So in our budget, you will see that we are changing the rates significantly for single adults who were the most disenfranchised group in the system. We're increasing the amounts that people can own and earn before they qualify, and we put in place the Ontario Child Benefit, which has lifted thousands of kids out of poverty. So there's more to be done, and we can learn from the basic income pilot and apply that knowledge to our social assistance system, and that's exactly what we'll do.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping time as well. Appreciate that.
Do I get an opportunity though? So I'm a huge supporter of basic income guarantee. The Green Party's been pushing this for years, but we can't allow it to be an excuse not to address poverty right now while the pilot is in place. And so we've never recovered from the social assistance rate cuts that the Harris government brought in. We've literally never recovered from them. So at the very least, we need to raise the existing social assistance rates to the low-income cutoff level, or at least to the level that is part of the basic income pilot. So everyone in Ontario, especially those who are living in poverty, can start to pull themselves out of poverty.
Okay, so we got a long list, right? And
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to direct your question maybe to one of the three, and then we'll go to the next question, okay? Or else we will not get through this.
Absolutely,
So the
and
next
thank you,
speaker,
Royson.
please direct your question to one of the candidates, and we have a short 30-second response.
And I might say very quickly, there is no line. I'm running around to your seats wherever you are. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that based on hands up and priorities, okay? So there's no line. Otherwise, we'll be here all night.
Let everybody know, Marva. Let everybody know. You got it, sister.
Thank you. My name is Kwabena, and I'm a taxpayer and a voter. So, it's excellent that we're hearing a lot about education. But we can't talk about education without the education funding formula. The first funding formula was introduced in 1972. Let's fast forward to the Rosansky report in 2002. The Harris government agreed that they would review the funding formula every 5 years. The Rosansky report also said the same thing. Up until this time, I haven't seen or heard about a review of the funding formula. Premier Wayne, what are you doing? In terms of the broken funding formula in education, you heard the young children, you heard everybody about education. I hear nothing but talk. So what are you doing to review the funding formula and improve it for our education in Ontario?
It's a great question. We review the funding formula every year. We change the funding formula every year. Not only do we change the amounts and increase funding, we change the way those regulations work. So every single year since we've been in office, when I was the Minister of Education, when Mitzi Hunter was the Minister of Education, we changed the way money is allocated. And you'll remember in 1972, boards had a local levy and they raised funds. And you know what? The reality is that led eventually to a really, really unequal education system across the province. There were some boards where kids were being funded at $4,000 a year. There were some per pupil. There were some boards where kids were being funded at $10,000 a year, and that was not fair. So we review the funding formula every year. It's been changed consistently, and we'll continue to change it year over year as the needs in the province change.
But I would just say the annual review isn't working because our schools are underfunded right now.
All right, next question, please.
My name is Amanda. My question is about affordable housing in the GTA. What next are we going to do to make housing more affordable for first-time buyers and for people entering the market for the first time? As right now, it's still too expensive, even though there's been a drop in some of the housing types.
Thank you for making it just a question.
So I don't know if you were somebody directly that you were asking the question to.
Andrea.
That's a thanks. But it is an extremely important question because we know so many people are now in the situation where they have no hope of ever buying a house in the neighborhood they were raised in, raising their families in the neighborhoods that they were raised in. And so the government's done a few things that have cooled off the market, and that was good. But we still see housing completely unaffordable. So we're talking about a number of different pieces. We're talking about trying to curb the flipping that continues to occur here in our province. We're looking at other types of affordability, so more cooperative housing, for example, get back into building affordable housing for communities again because people need it. Supportive housing, particularly for seniors and people that are having challenges in terms of living independently. All of these things are great ideas. We need to put them back on the table and make sure people can afford to live in our communities again.
Inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, I want to do that.
Everything on inclusionary zoning. We'll actually overhaul the inclusionary zoning to make sure it works for municipalities and builds more affordable units in those private developments.
So we got 4 minutes to go and about 24 questions. So let's go to the next one, please.
Thank you. My name is Sandy. I'm from Black Lives Matter, and I'm happy happy to be here with my colleagues from LAN. We've been working a lot to try to get police officers out of school. This is a huge problem because they tend to target our kids, and we've learned through this process that our kids are being carded in the schools by these police officers. They're being talked to by these police officers, data's being collected from them, and they're not getting consent from their parents first. Now, we got them out of the TDSB. We're now working in Peel. That's about to happen this year. So, you know, we could do it one by one, but it'd be really great if the province would just take it on and make it something that doesn't happen. So this question is to Kathleen, when will you tackle this problem? And for the rest of y'all, you can like slide it in when you have a question.
You know, I was not a fan of having police officers in schools when I was a trustee. I didn't think that it was a good idea. I think that there are good reasons, as you've outlined, for in many situations police officers not to be in schools. I think there may be some situations where there's a particularly good relationship between particular officers and a school, and I think that we need to not preclude that from happening. But overall, I think that boards need to review this, they need to look at it, and they need to make those decisions, and we need to make sure that they're paying close attention. But you know, I think we need to be realistic that where there are situations where the relationships are good, we should support that. But where what you're talking about is happening, where there are practices that are discriminatory and unfair, then of course that should not be the case.
Okay. Next question.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jacqueline Dixon. I'm representing GBK and FM Radio. And this question is for the next premier. So I'm going to assume that you will all answer it as if it were you.
Way to go, Jackie.
The black vote in Ontario, it represents the 4th largest voting bloc at a percentage of 5%, with Jamaicans representing over 250,000 of those votes, of that electorate. My question deals with two sides of our spectrum, our very old and our very young. The Ontario Child Services supports organizations such as the Ontario Children's Aid. It also supports organizations such as the Catholic Children's Aid and the Jewish Children's Aid. Would you support the organization and funding of a black children's aid so that our children do not lose their culture, do not lose sight on their culture, their heritage, morals, and principles that they were raised with? Second question to the twofold. It's a twofold.
Just one, please. Just one, please.
It's a twofold question that deals with our seniors.
Just one question, please answer. Please answer that.
So can I just say, Jackie, that I think you've hit on an extremely great idea, and one that we absolutely need to take seriously. There has been attempts to ensure that, for example, First Nations communities are able to have control over their own child welfare system, because of course there are more children in Canada right now that are in care across our country than were in residential schools at this point in time. And so it is a shameful situation. And so in Ontario, I have to give credit where credit is due. For many years now, since I think 2005, there has been an attempt to try to ensure that Indigenous communities are able to have their own child welfare system up and running for those very cultural reasons that Jackie described. I think it's a great idea, because we see too much ignorance and too much racism that exists in our child welfare system. We also have to have independent oversight in our child welfare system, which we don't have in this province, and we should have had for a long time.
So,
go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, this is exactly why we need forums like this for us to listen. This is an idea I'd never thought of, actually, and I think it's a brilliant idea, and it's exactly why we should have 4 leaders here listening to the community's concerns.
Thank you.
So the work.
So we do have. I'm sorry. Did we get the question answered?
No, I didn't get to. Okay, I just want to briefly say the work that Andrea was talking about is work that is being done right now. Cultural competency is incredibly important, and if what you're talking about is the best way to go about providing the best care for Black kids, then we need to look at all options.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Quickly, please.
So there's one back here.
Quickly.
Hi, good evening. My name is Joseanne Joe. I am a labor community activist. My question is to the future Premier of Ontario, whoever that may be. My question is about privatization. Now, privatization, okay, so to one, I would say to Premier Wynne, my question to you, because we know that privatization has happened in Ontario, Hydro One being one of the major examples that everyone knows about. We all know that the consensus is that privatization will open the job market, but what they're not knowing is that privatization causes part-time precarious work, especially for a lot of our young workers, which I am one of them.
Good.
So my question to you is, are you committed, if re-elected, to making essential services publicly owned and accountable? Because that is important to all of us.
So I didn't hear all the first part of your question, but I'm assuming that you're referring to Hydro One, that's okay. And so I just, I need to say, and Andrea and I have yelled at each other many times across the floor about this, and we're just going to have to disagree. But here's the thing. That was not a decision that I wanted to make. It was very hard, but it was made because I had made a commitment to build infrastructure. I had said to the people of this province that I was going to build roads and bridges and transit. I said that I was going to build up the province, and we could have, you're right, we could have just raised more taxes, we could have borrowed more, but the reality was we needed to make a decision in order to be able to build that transit and that infrastructure. That's why we made that decision. And we put some safeguards in place to make sure that we had some control over the board and over the CEO. But it was not a decision that was easy for me. It's not one I wanted to make. But the prime mover in that was that we had to get going on building more infrastructure, and that's what we've been doing.
The Financial Accountability Officer, in fact, says that it is the worst way to finance infrastructure projects and will cost us more money. That's the facts from an independent officer. But look, Bill 175, do you know what that is? That's the new Police Services Act that includes some of the new accountability measures, which I think we all support. But in Bill 75, we have the door opening for the privatization of police services. Now, if we cannot keep police services accountable as when they're public, how the heck are we going to keep privatized police services accountable? It's a very worrisome thing.
We have another question in the back. We have another question in the back. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Amina. I'm going to ask this question to the next Premier. And we are in the process of legalizing marijuana. What are you willing to do in regards to the youth who have been incarcerated or have been criminalized because
of the question is, marijuana is now legalized, so what about all those people who have been incarcerated? Do you want to free them?
No, and you know what? It is unconscionable that the federal government is going ahead in the process that they're going ahead with. Look, this is Justin Trudeau's problem. And the minute he talked about the legalization of marijuana, it should have been decriminalized at that moment, and it has not been. And so our kids are still going to jail for simple possession of marijuana. Absolutely unacceptable. And I got to tell you this, with all due respect, 40 outlets in all of Ontario, when this becomes law, is not going to in any way deal with the black market, if you want to call it that, or the criminal element that exists in marijuana right now in this province. The plan needs to be overhauled. When I become Premier, I'll do exactly that.
Well, you know that that's the beginning number, and you know there'll be many more across the province. Michael Coteau raised this issue at our cabinet table. He talked about this as a real concern. As Andrea has said, it is the federal government that has to look at this. It's certainly something that has been raised with them. We have raised it, it has been raised with them, and it is something that as a society we have to grapple with, but the federal government has to take action if it's going to
So
take
we have to grapple with the past, but we also have to prepare for the future, because my fear is we're going to continue to criminalize people for cannabis sales when we only have 40 government monopolies. Why not license local dispensaries, regulate them, keep them safe, and allow people in our communities to sell cannabis in a legal, safe way to get rid of the underground market and create economic development in our local communities.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
we have one last question. And only one person, very brief. Right here.
Given the high prevalence of sickle cell disease in the Black community,
we have a question about sickle cell disease back here, please. Thank you.
So given the prevalence of the disease in the Black community, the Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario has continued to meet with the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care and has received promises but with little delivery. If elected, will sickle cell disease be a provincial priority, and if so, how are resources and personnel going to be allocated in order to get to this agenda?
Of the conversation with the Ministry of Health. That is an ongoing discussion, and it is something that is already a priority. It's already something that we want to tackle. And you know, we talked about population-based health. Those are the kinds of resources that need to be put in place. So keep working with us. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know the details of the conversation with the Ministry of Health, but it's certainly something I'll take back to Helena Jasic, because that's exactly the kind of targeted investment and targeted strategy that we need to have.
But sickle cell disease in the Black population is not a new phenomenon, and so there should have been some, I think, some solutions already. And I looked to organizations like Taboo, who are doing great work when it comes to reaching out to community and bringing them into the community health center and dealing with the effects of sickle cell disease, and that's what we need to do more of. So yes, it's policy that needs to catch up, if you will, but we also have to not just talk policy, we have to talk action. Not just talk, but action on the ground.
And that's why money is going to those community organizations.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Mike Schrader, Andrea Horwath, and Kathleen Wynn for a wonderful debate. We covered an amazing number of subjects, and maybe all this tells us is that maybe we should have 2 debates in the Black community. I want you to commend yourself, as Ms. Lou would say, clap yourself for being very well behaved, and we appreciate your participation.
Before everyone departs, we're not quite done yet. We're almost done. There will be wrap-up closing remarks. Each of the leaders have 2 minutes for their wrap-up. Just 30 seconds, 45 seconds for wrap-up. But I wanted to call Velma Morgan, the chair of Operation Black Vote, the leader that helped to make this happen along with the rest of the group. And she has a presentation for the leaders. I also want to say, while she's doing that, thank you so much. I know that many of you had questions that we could not get to. This is a good thing in our community, and we hope to have another one of these so that you can ask some of those questions. We'll also even take your name if possible so that we can send the questions in. And so we thank you so very, very much. This is great. Photos. So 30-second closing, and then Yolanda Adoma from the JCA is going to give the closing thanks to all of you.
Lucky.
And then the group will be up for the group, all our sponsors. So can I turn it over now to the Premier and to Andrea and to Mike?
I'm going to talk for less than 30 seconds. You heard a lot of opinions, you heard a lot of issues raised tonight. What you didn't hear was from the one person who would have disagreed with pretty much everything that the 3 of us said. That's true. So the reality is that, folks, you know what, it was great that we were all here tonight, and it was really a privilege to hear from you, but I just ask you to please listen to what Doug Ford is saying on the campaign trail already and his attitudes on all of the issues that we discussed tonight. He should be here and he should be held accountable.
I just want to thank everybody for being out here tonight and being having such a great dialogue and discussion. Look, I believe that this province is ready for change. The question becomes what kind of change that we're going to get. And I would suggest to you that there's a good path to go down, and that's change for the better. That's what New Democrats are offering you. I look forward to talking with you throughout the next number of weeks to really bring change for the better to Ontario. Things don't have to be this way. They can be so much better. Let's get that work done together. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I believe this election is about challenging the status quo. And so ask yourself if the status quo is working for you. And I believe the only way to change the status quo in this province is to start voting for a new party with a new vision who's going to do politics differently by putting people first. And that's exactly what elected Greens are doing across Canada and across the world. People power change to change the status quo of Queen's Park. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before you go, I want to just take a moment for you to acknowledge and thank the organizers who spent hours and weeks. We talked about that the community doesn't know how to come together. We know how to come together, and we're interested in the issues that matter to Ontarians in our community. And so I just ask all the representatives from the various organizations to step forward and for us to publicly thank them for putting this on. It is not the end, the beginning and the end of the conversation. We will continue, and our vote will count in June.
I'm running in Scarborough North.
So what riding is that?
It's called Scarborough North, so it's Malvern community in Scarborough, all the way up to Steeles. So pretty much Nielsen to Steeles to Midland down to the 401.
And why should you be elected by those constituents?
I think I have an understanding of what's really going on in the lives of people. I want to change how people are experiencing life. That riding is made up primarily 90-some% of visible minorities. We all face different forms of discrimination, and I really want to begin having the conversation that tackles a lot of those issues and really begins to affect how we live our lives.
Tell the constituents your name that's going to be on the ballot.
All right, Dwayne Morgan is going to be the name on the ballot in Scarborough North this June.
And the party?
With the NDP.
Thank you,
all right,
sir.
no problem. Thank you.
Faisal?
Yes. Hi.
Speak your truth, man. Here's your opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. My name is Faisal Hassan. I'm the candidate for York South Western. York South Western, if you don't know, is the Highway 401, Western Road, all to Kill, all the way south of until you reach St. Clair. It is big riding. It's a lot of black community, and this election is a very important election. We have seen tonight the debate here. We have seen Andrea win the debate tonight, performing very well. And I think the Liberals had about 15 years of governing this province. They have let us down. It is a time for change, and also a change for the better.
Why should the constituents in your area elect you?
The constituency in York Southwestern, I have been involved in my community for many, many years, fighting against diesel trains and fighting for electrification of trains and asking the government clean trains now, fighting for community benefit agreements to benefit the community, jobs that are coming to our community. I've been very active in our community, and our community deserves a strong local voice that delivers results for them.
The name of your riding and your name again?
My name is Faisal Hassan, and the riding in which I am running and the riding I live is York Southwestern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else is running here?
All these are running.
Oh, well, ask the brother to turn around.
I mean, you got Nicky Clark over there.
What's your name?
Mahmoud Amin, 42 North.
And you're running, so give the parameters of Etobicoke North. What are the borders?
Etobicoke North is north of Dixon all the way, Kibblin and Sealy South. Highway 27 West, Finch and Islington East. It's a huge riding. This riding wasted 15 years under Liberal government, and the family in Etobicoke North are struggling, housing costs, hydro, and need someone on their side for a change.
And why are you running as the candidate in that area?
I am running because I used to volunteer Somalian youth in that area for so long. I had a small business, I had a relative, distance relative in the riding. I'm really concerned about the riding. That riding for 15 years, nothing has fixed it. It needs to be changed, and family in the riding needs somebody on their side for a change.
Say your name again in the riding you're running in.
My name is Mahmoud Amin. I'm riding for Etobicoke North.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more candidates here?
We have a lot. We have home.
Oh, tell them to come over. We want to get all the candidates here. Is she a candidate? Are you a candidate in this provincial election?
I am.
What's your name?
My name is Marjorie Knight. Marjorie Knight.
And what riding are you running in, Marjorie?
Cambridge and North Dumfries. Cambridge and North Dumfries.
So what are the boundaries for that area?
That would be Cambridge from the 401 to the outskirts of Ayr and North Dumfries.
Okay, and why are you running in that area?
That's where I live. That's where I moved to in 2001 with my children. And I have struggled with poverty issues, housing issues, how my children had to go through in school and being singled out because of their heritage. And I have now picked myself up. I went back to school at 50. I became a social worker, and I work with low-income families in the area. And I think that we need people that look like me, who has my lived experience, to take the fight to Queen's Park to get things better for them.
Your name again in the riding you're running in?
Marjorie Knight for Cambridge and North Dumfries.
Thank you. Any other candidates here? Let them come over and we will put them on.